The development context of Quarantine Zone: The Last Check carries a strong sense of a game born from a simple yet powerful pitch. Papers, please, with zombies, growing around that concept as the public pointed out its rougher edges. Since the reveal in May, and with the free demo circulating widely, it's clear that the project has become loop-driven. Tense survivor screening, immediate consequences, and that lingering paranoia of having let an infected person slip through. The partnership with Devolver Digital is positioning this as an apocalyptic simulator of cruel decisions, rather than just another zombie game. Playing the demo, what gripped me most was how the inspection booth is the heart of the game. Harsh lighting, ambient noise, people pleading, and you trying to remain clinical amidst the chaos. The admit, quarantine, eliminate cycle works precisely because every correct call brings relief, and every mistake delivers that good kind of video game guilt. The demo makes it clear that the pleasure here lies in being this border agent at the end of the world. At the same time, you can feel that the development is still stitching different systems into a single identity. Inspection, very strong. Camp management, okay. And the defense/combat parts, weaker. In many impressions of the demo, criticisms regarding impactless combat and a somewhat static world arise, which aligns with the feeling that these parts exist to break the pace, but lack the same polish and design intent as the screening process. This is where the interesting side of the context comes in. Based on what has been released, the game is heading toward launch with explicit promises of changes and content not found in the demo, including improvements to base defense and new elements like zombies falling from rooftops during attacks. To me, this sounds like a direct response to the feedback the demo inevitably generates. Let the screening shine and make the rest keep up. Because currently, the quality discrepancy between modules is what stands out most. The pre-launch traction is also noteworthy. Over 1.2 million wish lists and more than 2 million players on the demo are life-changing numbers for a project of this scale. When a game reaches this level, development becomes almost a public negotiation. The team needs to polish what went viral, the screening and dilemmas, without wasting too much time defending systems that players are merely tolerating rather than loving. Regarding Devolver specifically, the publisher usually bets on games with a strong hook and a certain fun discomfort. And here, the discomfort is well aimed. Trusting desperate people, suspecting signs, and living with the weight of the decision. Their official copy sells exactly that. Moral dilemmas, plus resource management, plus physical pressure from attacks. So the framing of the project feels very much in line with the kind of showcase Devolver handles well. With the launch set for January 12th, 2026 on Steam, the feeling remains that this game could blow up if the final version achieves two things: making diagnostic tools clearer and fairer without killing the tension, and giving enough weight and variety to the phases outside the booth so they don't feel like a chore. If they strike that balance, the promise becomes reality, an apocalyptic checkpoint simulator where the true terror isn't the zombie outside, but the error in judgment inside. What stands out most about the game's story is that it doesn't try to sell the zombie apocalypse as a heroic spectacle. It puts you in a dirty, bureaucratic, and urgent position where tragedy becomes routine. In the demo, the narrative functions much more through the weight of your decisions than through cutscenes. Every person in line is a micro tale of despair, and the game forces you to turn empathy into procedure. Trust, quarantine, or send to liquidation. The detail that struck me most is how the story is built upon the fear of being wrong. You make a rational decision based on symptoms, signs, and tools, but the panic of letting an infected person pass or killing someone clean becomes the true villain. As the demo begins to mix medical inspection with camp management, the story stops being just about who enters or not and becomes about what this place is becoming because of your choices, because resources and survivors become numbers, until the game reminds you that numbers also die. From what Devolver has shared, the promise of the game going deeper with new tools and systems, such as X-rays, probes, and a deeper management layer, suggests the narrative will become even more paranoid, less about zombies and more about control, suspicion, and the type of authority born in a crisis. I also liked that the promotional material hints at something larger behind the post, signs of a crumbling regime, strange orders, and layers of conspiracy, which for me is the perfect seasoning to keep the story from getting stuck solely in the checkpoint loop. If the full game can maintain this vibe from the demo, that feeling that every correct choice can still feel morally foul, a memorable story could emerge precisely because it is small, repetitive, and human. A world ending told through stamps, UV flashlights, and guilt. The gameplay caught my attention with its tense blend of medical detective work, survival, and base strategy, but also for how it attempts to balance everything without letting any part feel like filler. The survivor inspection part is truly the heart of the game. Every person in line becomes a small puzzle where you need to observe symptoms, use tools like scanners, UV lights, and stethoscopes, and make quick decisions based on visual clues and vital signs. That is where the sense of pressure and moral dilemma really works. However, the game tries to mix this mechanic with resource management, base building, and even drone defense, and that is where the experience becomes a bit uneven. The management and defense moments are cool, but they feel more obligatory than natural, and some mechanics like the drone and supply transport can be frustrating due to bugs or imprecise controls. The daily loop is well structured, with new challenges arising each day, new tools, new evacuation rules, outbreaks, horde attacks. This keeps the pace interesting, but some design choices like mouse sensitivity and scanners or menu bugs end up distracting a bit. I think the great strength of the gameplay is precisely the feeling that every choice has a consequence. Missing a diagnosis can mean an outbreak, letting contraband pass can compromise security, and mismanaging resources can leave the base vulnerable. It's rare to see a simulation game that truly makes you feel in control of a chaotic situation. What makes me curious is how the final version will handle this mix. If the base and defense systems are refined, the game could become a unique experience. But if they remain as they are in the demo, the focus will ultimately stay on the checkpoints and medical dilemmas. Anyway, it's a game that keeps me engaged through tension and the weight of decisions, but it still needs to prove it can balance all its systems without losing the identity of what actually works, the human drama of the checkpoint. The graphics gave me a very specific feeling in the demo. It's not a game that tries to impress you with fidelity, but rather with atmosphere. In that sense, it succeeds greatly when it traps you in that inspection cubicle, with rain, wet concrete, and harsh light hitting people's faces as if it were an interrogation. What I liked most visually is how the art direction uses lighting and mood to make you uncomfortable, almost as if the setting is constantly pushing you to make a quick decision. There is a weight to the palette and materials, metal, plastic, dirt, that perfectly matches the idea of dirty work at the end of the world. In practice, NPC models and animations are functional, but not always convincing, and this becomes more apparent when you start noticing repeated poses and stiff behavior. The bright side is that the game compensates for this simplicity with a clear reading of the elements that matter for gameplay: symptoms, items, tools, so you quickly understand where to look. A detail I really enjoyed is the tactile feel of the diagnostic tools on the screen. They are large, prominent, somewhat crude, and this helps sell the theme of improvised screening. As Devolver showed in their overview videos, the variety of equipment, like portable X-rays and specific inspection tools, also becomes part of the visual spectacle because each gadget brings its own interface language. However, when you look beyond the checkpoint, the visuals lose strength. The world feels more static and scenic than alive, and this breaks immersion slightly because it gives the impression that the apocalypse is only happening at your counter. In the demo, this is very clear in how the outside and certain city elements feel more scripted than organic. If the final version polishes animations and environment density and gives more life to the space outside the post, these visuals have everything to age well because the visual identity is already there and very distinct. As the demo stands now, the visuals are strong in the micro, the checkpoint, and weaker in the macro, the world. But it is still one of those games where you remember the atmosphere before you remember resolution or textures. The performance in the demo gave me that almost there feeling. It's playable and engaging, but there are moments when the game reminds you it's a test version. This matters because the official release is January 12th, 2026, so the final polish will make a difference in the rhythm of the inspection loop. In my case, performance was more convincing when I lowered expectations and played on medium settings, as the game seems much more stable when you stop chasing ultra at all costs. When I set it to 1440p on medium, it stayed at 60 FPS, while on high, it dropped to around 55 FPS, which fits the vibe of the demo. It's not heavy all the time, but it doesn't have much overhead. The point is that the demo clearly has performance variability from machine to machine, and the devs themselves mention that optimization work is still ongoing, in addition to issues when trying to run it on unsupported hardware. For me, the most annoying part is that the game relies on fluidity so you can observe details quickly and make decisions, so any drop becomes the wrong kind of stress, not the good gameplay stress. I also felt that the worst stutters tend to appear in the segments where the game moves away from the counter and turns into action defense for a few minutes. Not because they are unplayable, but because those parts have more happening simultaneously. When the performance hiccups, it feels like the game is switching genres and the engine trips along with it. On the Steam Deck, the demo was practically unplayable due to controls and profiles that didn't work, even if it wasn't strictly a lack of FPS. What makes me curious and a bit worried is that Devolver is promising the full game will go deeper with more tools and a new base management interface, among other additions. And each extra layer could impact performance if not well optimized. At the same time, if these improvements come alongside fine-tuning, it could move from almost there to a very smooth experience at launch. If you're looking to prepare for the launch, it's worth checking the specs on the game page: Windows 10, i5-10400F, 16GB RAM, and GTX 1050 Ti as a baseline, and treating that as a sign of the overhead the game wants. For those aiming higher, some sources recommend an i7-10700F and RTX 3060, which aligns with my impression of the demo. It runs on decent PCs, but it breathes better when there is spare GPU power. If the question is it worth buying at launch or waiting? The most honest answer based on the demo is it's worth it at launch if the idea of being an early adopter doesn't bother you and you're okay with potential balance adjustments and bugs, but it's worth waiting if you want a polished, frictionless experience. In the demo, the core is too good to ignore. The checkpoint inspection loop is addictive, full of visual reading and quick decisions, and the sense of responsibility works very well when you realize a mistake can lead to chaos. It was the kind of game that made me say, just one more day. And when a bureaucracy sim achieves that, there's something special there. The main reason to consider waiting is that the demo was very transparent and showing its rough edges, performance drops, bugs, and parts that seem less polished, especially in base management and certain transitions, appear frequently. If these points are triggers for frustration, buying on day one might mean swapping good tension for technical irritation. On the other hand, what has been shared about the full game suggests real improvements and content expansion. Devolver speaks of going deeper with new tools like X-rays, eye probes, reflex hammers, zombie keijus, and a new base management interface. This, to me, is a positive sign that they understood where the game needs to evolve: variety, scaling, and quality of life. This game is recommended for those who like survival or management under pressure because it mixes screening, resources, and defense moments, even if that mix still divides opinions. Who I wouldn't recommend it for, based on the demo: those who hate repetitive tasks, those who lack patience for a rough interface, and those who want a constant action game. Because here, the draw is methodical work, and the "did I let one pass" anxiety. If your tolerance for stuttering and bugs is low, waiting for post-launch patches is the safest route. My personal rule of thumb here would be simple: buy at launch if you want to be part of the current conversation and enjoy watching the game improve, especially if the checkpoint part already won you over in the demo. But if you want the best first impression, wait at least for the first few updates and release feedback, because the demo already showed the game has massive potential. It just needs that final polish to shine without reservations.
Bitten by a dog, not a zombie.